Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Let me start by remembering the 2nd of November, 2004. It happened to have been Election Day in the United States when George Bush beat John Kerry. It was a very exciting day. I was in California that day, and I was woken at about 6 o'clock in the morning by a friend who announced to me this murder. And I then went on to Al Jazeera, where I debated an Islamist who was justifying this action because of the provocation that Theo van Gogh had engaged in. It was a very memorable and awful day. What I'd like to do is survey not just the 10 years since that horrible day, but 25 years. 25 years is since Salman Rushdie published the Satanic Verses. And there has been a pattern that began that year that has repeated itself over and over again. So first, in 1989, there was Salman Rushdie and the Satanic Verses. In 2004, there was the murder of Theo van Gogh. In 2006, there was Robert Redeker, who had to go into hiding. In 2007, Mr. Wilkes, Lars Wilkes, had to do the same. Kurt Vestergaard was attacked in 2010. Lars Hedegaard was attacked in 2013, and many others who are not in this room. Geert Wilders came under protection in 2008. Over and over again, when these attacks take place, we see a pattern. First, Westerners say or do something critical of Islam, and then Muslims respond with name-calling and outrage, demands for retraction, threats of lawsuits and violence, and then actual violence. And finally, the Westerners hem and haw, prevaricate, debate, and finally give in. I shall argue 2 points. First, that this is really ultimately not about free speech. Yes, the battleground is free speech, but the issue is Western civilization. Free speech is just the battleground. The issue is Western civilization. Will it survive or will it not? And secondly, that the right of Westerners to say critical, provocative things about Islam has declined in the 25 years since Rushdie's book. Now, I've developed this term, which is in my title, Rushdie Rules. The Rushdie Rules result from February 14th, 1989, when Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, watched on television as Pakistanis were responding with violence to the publication of the Satanic Verses. And outraged by what he saw, Khomeini put this edict against Rushdie's life. This was unprecedented. No one had ever done anything remotely like this. A head of one government called for the execution of a novelist living in another country. This surprised everyone, from the Iranian government officials to Rushdie himself. No one imagined that a magical realist novel with people falling out of planes and surviving, animals that talk, and so forth, might incur the wrath of the ruler of Iran. No one expected this. This edict led to physical attacks on bookstores in Italy, Norway, and the United States, and on translators of the Satanic Verses. And the greatest violence was in Turkey, where 36 people were killed, including an attack on the translator. Other violence in Muslim-majority countries led to 20 more dead. The edict contains 4 important elements. First, and most important of all, by taking offense to Rushdie's description of Muhammad and other events, what he called Rushdie's opposition to Islam, the Prophet, and the Quran, Khomeini delineated a wide range of sacred topics that may not be discussed without invoking a death sentence. Secondly, he targeted, quote, all those involved in the publication who were aware of its contents, unquote. And by doing this, he said he's not just attacking Rushdie, but everyone in the cultural establishment, editors, advertisers, distributors and others who had some engagement with this. So it's not just one person, but the whole body of cultural activity. Third, by ordering Rushdie's execution, quote, so that no one else will dare to insult the Muslim sanctities, unquote, Khomeini made clear that his purpose was not just to punish one writer, but to prevent future such insults or ridicule. And finally, by demanding that those unable to execute Rushdie themselves, quote, report him, unquote, Khomeini called on every Muslim worldwide to become part of an informal network of intelligence and potentially of attack dedicated to upholding Islamic values. So there are 4 features. Don't touch certain subjects. Everyone involved in the production will be harmed. This should never happen again. And there's an informal network of Muslims. These are the Rushdie rules, and they've been applied since then over and over again. Now, I said there are 2 points. The first of these points is that Westerners generally perceive the violence that follows from these Rushdie rules as a challenge to their right of self-expression, and indeed it is that. But the recurrent pattern of Islamist uproar exists to achieve 3 goals, not always articulated, that go well beyond prohibiting criticism of Islam. The first one is to establish the superior status of Islam. You can criticize any other religion, but you can't criticize Islam. The free market of ideas exists for every other religion. Say what you will. You can have plays, operas, books, novels, but not about Islam. There's no free market of ideas about Islam. Secondly, Muslims are superior and Westerners are inferior. Muslims are superior, non-Muslims or Kafirs are inferior. Islamists routinely do and say things that are offensive to Westerners, and that's okay, but not the other way around. If you look at the kind of cartoons in Muslim publications, you'll find egregious insults to Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. That's fine, not the other way. Should this imbalance of Muslim on top and non-Muslim below continue, one reaches what's called the dhimmi status, D-H-I-M-M-I. And this allows people of the book, particularly Jews and Christians, to continue the practice of their religion under Muslim rule, subject to many restrictions. In turn, establishing the dhimmi status leads to the third and final ambition of the Rushdie rules, which is to establish Sharia, the Islamic law that Lars Hedegaard was just talking about. The Sharia, as I pointed out, regulates both private and public life. The private dimension includes intensely personal matters such as bodily cleanliness, sexuality, childbearing, family relations, clothing, and diet. In the public realm, the Sharia regulates social relations, commercial transactions, criminal penalties, the status of women and minorities, slavery, the nature of rule, the judiciary, taxation, and warfare. In brief, Islamic law includes everything from toilet etiquette to the conduct of warfare. The Sharia deeply contradicts, as Lars pointed out, the deepest premises of Western civilization. The unequal relations between male and female, between Muslim and non-Muslim, between owner and slave, cannot be reconciled with the equality of rights that is precious and intrinsic to our civilization. The harem cannot be reconciled with monogamy. Islamic supremacism contradicts freedom of religion, and a sovereign God cannot allow democracy. Were Islamists to achieve the Sharia order, they would effectively replace civilization with Islamic civilization. Closing down discussion of Islam paves the way toward this end. Conversely, retaining free speech about Islam represents a critical defense against the imposition of an Islamic order. In short, keeping our civilization requires an open discussion of Islam. The Islamists want to close it down because they want to close down our civilization. So it's not just about freedom of expression, it's about something much, much larger. It's about our whole civilization. My final point is about what's happened since 1989. In retrospect, responses to the Rushdie Edict among intellectuals and politicians in 1989 were noteworthy for the support that they gave the imperiled novelist, especially on the left. Leftist intellectuals were more likely to stand by Rushdie than intellectuals on the right, in part because Rushdie was a self-defined man of the left. Times have changed. A recent book by an American intellectual named Paul Berman, called The Flight of the Intellectuals, excoriates, attacks his fellow liberals for, quote, fumbling badly, mistaking badly, in their effort to grapple with Islamist ideas and violence, unquote. In short, the left has it wrong. And it wasn't just intellectuals. François Mitterrand, the socialist president of France, called the threat to Rushdie an absolute evil. The Green Party in Germany sought to break all economic agreements with Iran. A European Union resolution supported Rushdie as, quote, a signal in the spirit to assure the preservation of civilization and human values, unquote. The United States Senate unanimously passed a resolution that declared its commitment, quote, to protect the right of any person to write, publish, sell, buy, and read books without fear of intimidation and violence, unquote. For every exercise in free speech since 1989, such as the Danish Muhammad cartoons, uncountable legions of writers, publishers, and illustrators have shied away from expressing themselves. I can give you example after example of artists, playwrights, authors, novelists who say, I don't want to get near this subject of Islam. Changes since 1989 result mainly from the growth of three isms, three new political forces: multiculturalism, left fascism, and Islamism. The multicultural impulse regards no particular way of life or belief system or political philosophy as better or worse than any other. It reminds me of a discussion of what should we do for dinner tonight. Should we go to Japanese or Italian? They're both very nice, they're both very tasty. It doesn't really make a difference, does it? Well, that's how the multiculturalists see much more profound things than dinner. It doesn't really make a difference. There's no real difference between environmentalism or Wiccism, let's say witches. They are perfectly valid alternatives to the Judeo-Christian civilization. Why fight for one's way of life when it has no claim to be superior to any other? Second is left fascism, which in fact says, actually, if you look closely, Western civilization is worse than any other. Racism, imperialism. The West has made life terrible for non-Westerners. Led by such figures as the late Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, this left fascist movement seized Western power, which they call empire with a capital E, as the world's main threat, with the United States and Israel seen as the chief offenders. And finally, of course, the third major development is Islamism, the radical Islamist impulse to apply Sharia. This has grown enormously since 1989. I mean, look at the world around us. It's ISIS and other such phenomenon dominate the headlines. Mohammed Morsi, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Wherever you look in the Muslim-majority countries, the Islamist surge is underway. It has become the most powerful form of radical utopianism. Fascism and communism are hardly to be seen. It's Islamism everywhere. And it forms an alliance with the left, dominating civil societies, challenging many governments, and taking over others. It has established a beachhead in the West and is advancing its agenda in international institutions. The United Nations, for example, has passed resolutions against the defamation of religion, i.e., the defamation of Islam. The yin of Western weakness, in short and in conclusion, has met with the yang of Islamist assertion. Defenders of Western civilization must fight not only the Islamists, but also the multiculturalists who enable them and the leftists who ally with them. Thank you.